You're listening to Jeremy Vaeni's Paratopia vlog, right here on YouTube.
Well, what do you say to the people who then say, well, what about John Mack?
What about him?
Well,
I mean,
had
I'm
a background
sorry.
in psychology, and he used hypnosis, and everything's hunky-dory.
What do you really want me to talk about that?
Yeah.
I think anybody who uses it without knowing the background of what it's used for, how it's used for, he still used it. Does that make any sense? Does that speak to him for me? Does that say enough? I put him in the same category as I do Hopkins and Jacobs. I don't care if he's trained in that or not. To use it for that purpose was wrong. And I think that was a lapse in judgment. You know, and we've talked about lapse of judgment in association with this thing before. I think it's a lack of judgment to employ that and be a trained professional, or to be a doctor, you know, teaching this in a college, you know, capacity, teaching psychology.
Well, I'll say part of the problem might be our ignorance of when, you know, it sort of became more solidified that hypnosis was bad for regression. Because it could very well have been after, you know, Mack was doing that.
Right.
Because for a while, I mean, you know, it was sort of up in the air. What is hypnosis? How
Right.
good or bad before you is it? And this paper I read from Berkeley is from 2007.
Yeah.
So who even knows if... Well, somebody knows. Somebody smarter than I do knows the answer to this.
Well, I
when
mean,
they figured it out.
Yeah, in the psychological community, when did they know that this wasn't happening? I mean, I don't know. I mean, Scott's book, I don't know when that was written, but that dispelled a lot of the pseudoscientific practices in psychology. That was the purpose of his book. And I got to say, well, like when I called him originally to have him on the show, he wasn't going to do it. He said flatly, I don't think we're going to have a lot of common ground. And I said, I don't think you seem to understand. I've been talking for at least 10 years about how detrimental this is to the study of what we're looking at. Whether or not you believe any of this is going on is irrelevant to me. I want to know about the practice. I want to know about what you think when you see the work of these people. How do you parse that out with your education, knowing what you know about the workings of the human mind, and what value is it? And that's how we brought him on. And we still had to do a great amount of convincing back and forth, me and him, to get him to actually do it. And so when he came on and said what he had to say about it, I really thought most people would look at that episode and go, holy crap, what are we doing? What is going on? But even on our own message board, we got people saying, well, what do we do now? Something else, perhaps, is the answer. Something else. You know, my personal opinion is back in the 80s, early 90s, that this was in such widespread use that they created experiencers from nothing. I watched, as I did lectures back then, I watched friends of mine regress other friends of mine with no training whatsoever. Based on what they saw on a tape that they bought at a UFO conference, they would lay on a bed and let them do this to it. It just compounds and compounds and compounds.
Well, there's that problem, and then I also, like, I don't rule out that Emma Woods is actually an experiencer. I don't rule it out. I think it's quite possible that she had a bunch of bizarre experiences early on that she went to Jacobs for, and he compacted them into this, or molded them into this alien hybrid situation, and I have a feeling a lot of that goes on as well.
Well, we've seen how the differences between Bud Hopkins' work, David Jacobs' work, John Mack's work, pick and choose who you want, and then look at what they recovered individually. And you see the differences per the person doing the regression, per the investigation. You see the separation. What do you attribute that to? I mean, that's the personality or the preconceived notion of the researcher.
This is where I would even say, again, to pick on Mike Good, that it doesn't matter how competent the researcher is or that the hypnotist is. The problem is hypnosis itself.
Yeah.
And part of that problem, of course, is the dynamics between the therapist, the expectations of the therapist, and the expectations of the person undergoing hypnosis. And that's always going to be there no matter how competent the therapist is. And so I think that's the story of John Mack.
Yeah, well, that could be. Yeah, that could be. I mean, I have to admit, I don't, and I'll admit this to everybody, I did not follow his work whatsoever.
Well, here's the other thing
because
about Mack.
It just spoke to me as another hypnotherapist.
I mean, I've heard people say that Mack really didn't do therapy like that, that he just sort of lightly put people under and relaxed them and whatever. I mean, I don't know if there's a difference.
Probably deep relaxation techniques are different.
Right.
I'm not familiar enough with his work, but I can say, I mean, for my money, if he called it hypnotic regression or employed some of the same techniques, then I put him in the same category. Relaxation is fine.
But that
depends on, again, you're still going to someone to have this studied in that capacity. And when you go to somebody in that capacity, you're already contaminated to that point. And so what are you going to remember? You're going to remember exactly what you want to remember. You know? Mm-hmm. And people would say, well, I didn't ask for this, and I don't want this. I think I hate to say it.
I don't buy that.
I think on some level it may be scary for them, but I think on some level I've watched hundreds of hours of tapes from people, regression, not related to anybody that we're talking about here, but just regular psychologists doing this. I mean, one of the men who started the experiencer support group that I went to was a therapist, and that's what he did, was regression hypnotherapy. I said, I don't want any part of it. And we had back and forth on that all the time. And ultimately, it just becomes for me one of those things where if you're going in there and you're seeking these people out, you're recalling this, there seemed to be this same dynamic as I'm watching these regression tapes over and over and over, that it's almost like they're watching a movie. It almost seems like it's that kind of thing. They're watching this movie, and this particular doctor even handled it like a movie. Like if it got too scary, you closed the curtain, that sort of thing. And it almost felt to me that people were looking for something in that regression therapy of a sense of specialness or mystery, or there was very much that flavor throughout all of those tapes that I used to watch that kind of spoke that they weren't crying so much out of fear but out of personal awe at what they thought they were experiencing. So it's not only, and this is, to me, is the most dangerous part of regression, and Scott Lilienfeld talked about this at length on the show. When you're going in and you're questioning someone in a highly suggestible state, you're creating memories. You are actively changing who that person is because you are altering their memories. I've had discussions with people about regression therapy for years. All of them ended extremely poorly because I get fed up and walk away. But ultimately, all those people aggressively defend their memories that they recovered under regression. Does anyone know why? Because for them, they are real memories. Because their memories have been altered by this belief, then implanted in some kind of suggestible way in that state to be an actual memory. For them, it's as real as us going to meet a listener tonight for coffee. It's as real as that. I mean, that's what's really, truly horrifying to me about this. And so that's why it's so aggressively defended. And now, years later, after all of these castles in the air have been built upon that, no one wants to hear, oh, you know what? You really can't trust any of that. That's like going back to square one again. Who wants to do that? Careers have been built on this. You know, dollars have been spent. You know, that to me is the biggest horror in all of this, is that you're actually changing who someone is without that interaction of a hypnotherapist leading them through this sort of scenario. Those people would be, oh, well, I don't remember, and would go on, you know, perhaps later to remember on their own, to maybe study it some more and learn more about it, to entice more experience out of it. Who knows? Who knows how you progress with this stuff? I got plenty that I don't remember. I remember a lot. There's a lot I don't. And I've always said to everyone, if I don't remember it, I don't want to remember it. I'll know when it's time to remember it, what's going on, or I'll get hints or repeats. I mean, even. But for people to still be so defensive of this, it's because they built, again, we've talked about belief systems before. This is the hardest thing to overcome in this, is the belief system that someone has set down because I've got a handle on it now. I got it. And now it's like, no, now it's what? Now it's, now it's taken away. And now where do you go with it? Now what do you do? That's the whole point. It's tackling yet another belief system.
Well, my vlog, there you have it.
Is there anybody there?
Is there anybody here? That's it. So, for those of you who, believe that you think outside the box simply because you're into ufology or into the paranormal, it's time to re-examine the new box that you've made for yourselves. And that we make for, all of us have to do that. I should include myself in that we all do. And, deconstruct the stuff that is not working. Hypnosis is not working because it can't, because it's not meant to. It's that simple. And neither is this bullshit bravado and not taking responsibility for your actions. And for the Gene Steinberg, not
it's bigger than that.
The whatever.
It's bigger than that.
Bigger than what?
It's bigger than admitting wrongs. To admit you're wrong and to reassess your data is really what everybody bitches about in ufology. Let's take the scientific method. Well, the scientific method revises itself as it discovers new things. This is not a new thing.
Well, ufology is schizophrenic. Ufology has always been schizophrenic because it's always been this thing of, we're outside the mainstream because the mainstream doesn't understand because they're all sheeple, But then begging the mainstream to take you seriously, and then when the mainstream takes you seriously, it becomes the cycle. Well, I don't believe them. Once they take you seriously and they go, well, okay, this part's true, that part's not. Well, I don't believe you because you're the mainstream. It's like, like even like Lemberg was, in his article, I guess cited what's his name, Simon, Dr. Simon.
You thought we were wrapping up.
Yeah, we'll wrap after this. Cites Dr. Simon who did the Betty and Barney Hill case, and then I go and I wiki Dr. Simon, and so sure enough, Dr. Simon's conclusion, the hypnotherapist, was that Betty and Barney Hill were dreaming, and that she had a nightmare, and that he confabulated based on her nightmare. And I say, well, Alfred, if you're going to go with that, then you've also got to follow through and go with his conclusion, because he's the doctor you're citing, right? Well, no, I don't have to do that, because I'm an independent thinker. No, dude, it doesn't work that way. That's not the way arguments go. But in any event, I'm done blabbing.
Really?
Not really, but on camera.
By the way, fart chair, right here.
This brown, white. And notice the one I'm in. This will be brown soon enough. Oh, Jeff, thanks for stopping by.
Well, it's nice to be here. Is there anybody? Nobody's actually watching.
Thanks for stopping by your own house.
Right. This is my place. I have blue carpet and brown chairs.
I can't wait for this to be in 5 parts.
This concludes Jeremy Vaeni's Paratopia vlog right here on YouTube.